Hello! One of the basic ingredients of the chocolate bar that you are munching on is cacao beans. Imagine now living in a Mayan city of the 8th century AD, going to the market to buy, let's say, a rabbit, and being asked to pay in cacao beans, and to be precise, the merchant asks for 10 cacao beans. Cacao beans as currency. Next on Random History. Cacao beans come from the tree Theobroma cacao, native to the tropical regions of Mesoamerica. Currently, though, the largest producer of cacao beans in the world is Ivory Coast, with roughly a third of the total production. The name Theobroma was given to this tree by the Swedish botanist Carl Linnaeus in 1753, and its etymology is quite interesting. It is derived from the Greek terms theos, which means God, and broma, which means food. So literally, Theobroma means food of the gods. Looking up for the term currency in the Random House College Dictionary, it is defined as something that is used as a medium of exchange or money. In order for something to be called money, it must serve four basic functions. Money can be used as a medium of exchange. It can be used as a means of payment of debts, a store of value between payments or exchanges, a measure of value so that prices can be calculated even in the absence of money. Currencies can be classified into three monetary systems. First, we have fiat money, which is a form of currency that has no intrinsic value. This means that it has little or no value in itself. Its value stems from the fact that a government sets, regulates and backs its value, or because parties engaging in an exchange agree on its value. The various banknotes or coins issued by governments are examples of fiat money. Then we have representative money, which is often printed on paper and has no value in its own, but it represents something of value. For instance, a certificate of claim on a commodity like, let's say, silver is a form of representative money. It is basically a piece of paper that has no value in its own, but certifies that we practically possess something valuable like silver. And now we come to the final form of currency, commodity money. In this case, the means of exchange has value of its own, or as we say, it has intrinsic value. The value of commodity money derives from the substance used or the use of the means of exchange for some purpose. Examples of commodity money include silver, gold, or cacao beans. The Mayan civilization was a Mesoamerican civilization developed by the Mayan peoples. It is known for the sophisticated writing system, the only Mesoamerican writing system that has been substantially deciphered, as well as for its advancements in the arts, architecture, mathematics, calendar and astronomy. This vibrant civilization was developed in areas that today comprise parts of Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, the Honduras and El Salvador. The first developments in agriculture and the establishment of the first permanent settlements date since before 2000 BC. This is the so-called Archaic period, which is followed by the Pre-Classic period that extends between 2000 BC and 250 AD, when we have the first complex societies and the development of cities that possessed monumental architecture. 250 AD marks the beginning of the Classic period that saw the rise of numerous city-states, often competing with one another, and the creation of a complex trade network. This period ended amidst a widespread political collapse that resulted in the intense warfare and the abandonment of cities in the 9th century AD. The Classic period was followed by the Post-Classic period, which itself ended with the Spanish colonization in the 16th century. The cultivation of cacao trees in the Mesoamericas by the early Pre-Classic period is well documented. As a matter of fact, the earliest traces of cacao residues were identified in pots from the Chiapas and Veracruz, dating between 1900 and 1500 BC. Eventually, cacao beans were used in the preparation of a frothy beverage drunk by the elites. So in a way, drinking this beverage served as a marker of social status. The excavations at the ancient Maya site of Calakmul, Mexico, have uncovered the 7th century AD painted small pyramid in the center of what may have been a marketplace. The particular structure is decorated with murals depicting scenes of its inhabitants giving, receiving and consuming diverse foods, as well as displaying and transporting other goods. Among the depicted scenes there is one of a woman offering a bowl of what is probably frothing chocolate to a man in exchange for tamale dough. It is also probable that cacao beans were used by the Mayans as a means of payment of tribute to the governing lords. Impressive murals dating to the 8th century AD were discovered in the ancient Maya archaeological site named Bonampak. There, tribute presentation scenes are depicted which include cacao beans being displayed in sacks with a numerical glyph corresponding to 40,000 cacao beans. The existence of such artifacts clearly implies the frequent use of cacao beans as means of payment. Sometimes scenes like this contain captives of war as well, so it has been suggested that cacao beans were used in the payment of ransom of elite or royal prisoners. Historical evidence suggests furthermore that the Mayan city-states even formed rather unstable alliances and waged wars for the control of the cacao-producing regions. The Mayan civilization lacked a centralized authority as the people mostly lived in more or less independent city-states, so the economy must have been rather unregulated and subject to inflation. In an attempt to improve their position in the market economy, cacao orchard owners and merchants might have been relatively free to introduce cacao beans in the marketplaces without any restrictions. The oversupply of cacao beans could theoretically lead to inflation of the currency. Probably, inflation was mitigated by two factors. Firstly, cacao beans are perishable. One can store them reliably for a year at most before they start to suffer from mold and disintegration. Secondly, cacao beans were continuously consumed. They were still being used for the preparation of an important drink in ceremonial and religious events. As a result, cacao holders of cacao beans were obliged to spend them while they were still drinkable and held any value. There is some debate as to whether the perishability of cacao beans could lead to economic turmoil in the case of shortfalls in the production due to climatic change or natural disaster. In fact, there are those who theorize that an eventual loss of cacao production was the reason behind the political collapse of the Mayan civilization at the end of the Classic period. However, strong arguments against this theory do exist. The Mayan people did not use exclusively cacao beans as currency. Actually, it seems plausible that they also used other commodities in that respect, such as textiles, maize grain, or certain types of green stone. So, if one commodity crashed for one reason or another, it would not drag the whole system with it. The Aztecs were another Mesoamerican culture developed by different ethnic groups, the Aztec people, that dominated parts of central Mexico and spoke a common language, the Nahuatl. The heyday of the Aztec civilization spanned between 1300 AD and 1521, when the capital of the Aztec Empire, Tenochtitlan, fell to a small group of Spanish conquistadors led by Hernán Cortés, and the Aztec Emperor was captured. This marked the beginning of the process of conquest and incorporation of Mesoamerican peoples into the Spanish Empire. The Aztec Empire was a confederation of 3 city-states and reached its maximal extent just prior to the Spanish invasion in 1519. The Aztecs had conquered parts of the land of the Mayan people as well and incorporated cacao beans into their economy as currency. However, the climate around the Aztec center of power, Tenochtitlan, the site of modern Mexico City, was too dry to permit the growth of cacao trees. So cacao that grew mostly in southern Mexico and in the Central American nations was traded in those areas and sent as tribute throughout the Aztec Empire, particularly to the capital. Bernardino de Sahagún was a missionary priest and pioneering ethnographer who participated in the Catholic evangelization of colonial New Spain. He learned the local language Nahuatl and studied the Aztec beliefs, culture and history for more than 50 years. He collected all his findings in a book named the general history of things of New Spain. The best known extant manuscript of this opera magna is named the Florentine Codex. In an extract of this book, Sahagún describes the good and the bad seller of cacao beans. From his description, we conclude that the value of cacao beans in exchange depended upon their desirability in the production of chocolate drink. Specifically, fresh and plump beans were preferable to small and shriveled beans, and ashy color was more desirable than red one. Furthermore, we learn that there were deceitful merchants that literally counterfeited cacao beans by actually creating cacao lookalikes with low-quality materials such as ash. We learn more from the naturalist and court physician Francisco Hernández de Toledo, who was ordered to embark on the first scientific mission in the New World in 1570. He lists 4 varieties of cacao beans based on their size and notes that only the smallest beans were actually drunk, whereas the rest were used as money. A 1712 decree in Brazil listed cacao beans as a commodity that legally circulated as money that could be used for the payment of troops. In Nicaragua, during the 19th century, a slave could be bought for 100 cacao beans. It seems that cacao beans continued to be used as currency for small exchanges well into the 19th and probably into the 20th century as well by remote Indian tribes residing in Mexico and Central America. And this was the story of cacao beans used as currency. In the description below you can find some resources for further reading. If you feel so inclined, please like, share and subscribe in order not to miss out on our future videos. Post any suggestions for subjects you would like us to dwell into the comments below. Until the next time, keep learning.